Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Hello girls, and welcome to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Siggy, one of the WFA's educators and a women's online coach. Today, I've got Sofia with me. We've actually known each other for quite a while, and it's a funny story, so I'll say it in a second, unless Sofia is going to share it with us. But she is joining me today, and we're going to be, well, not me, she's going to be sharing her journey from being a WBFF competitor to motherhood and running a full-time business. She specializes in coaching women through physical and mental strength, in regards to training, but also habit formations. And I'm all about that as well. And from her recent journey, she's now also specializing in pre and postnatal health and well-being, from recovery to help more women function better and function more for performance-based as well. So Sofia, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to chat.
I know, so good. So before we started recording, we were talking about Sofia's recent birth journey, and I have to share this because, like, I'm no mother, but for those who are mothers who are listening, I literally asked Sofia, I was like, "What does it feel like to give birth?" And she's like, "It feels as if you're about to take a big constipated poo," and I was just like, okay, makes sense. I'm going to tick that on my list and be like, feels like a constipated poo.
100% it does. I was just saying that my husband was actually asking me what the pains and the sensations are like. And I said, look, nothing's comparable to it. I haven't experienced anything else in my life, like broken bones and all that. I can't, it's not the same. But the only thing that is comparable is the feeling of pushing the little bubba out. And I thought, I was just confused about the feeling. I even asked the midwives. I was like, am I actually giving birth or going to the toilet? And she's like, no, you're doing it right.
Oh, it's so funny. Well, I'm sure for our listeners who are mums, they'll probably be like nodding their head going, yeah, that's exactly how I felt.
Hopefully I'm not weird, but
no, I don't think so. Not at all. Yeah, let's chat about the transition. How has it been for you going from being a professional competitor and an athlete to being a mum now?
Yeah, that transition is something that is not really spoken about too much. I do follow a lot of female athletes who are also mums or who are have recently given birth, and it was like a gap that I knew that mums were talking about identity changes and the whole concept of matrescence, which is that psychological aspect of transitioning your old identity into a new motherhood or parenthood identity that comes with a lot of baggage that you don't necessarily understand or are aware of. And for me, I was coming from a very regimented, full-time training, full-time nutrition individual who prioritized health, and I would never go a day without training, to falling pregnant and basically doing the complete antithesis of that. I mean, I was very sick in my first trimester. I was very nauseous. So any kind of activity was just me lying on the bed with my eyes closed, wishing that I didn't feel like I wanted to throw up. So, and it just kind of, I didn't quite feel it until the third trimester, where all of the physical symptoms had kind of moved on and I felt well enough to kind of get back into the gym. And it kind of hit me that I couldn't go to the gym 4 or 5 days a week. I couldn't do traditional PBs in the gym anymore, and I couldn't even eat properly. I had such food aversions, like the smell of meat would make me sick. And
I've heard that a lot.
Yeah, for the first time in 10 years, I had McDonald's because it was the only thing that didn't gross me out. And at that stage, I was still working with my coach because he's very good with when it comes to athletes and pregnancy and that transition. And he said, look, if you can get the calories in because you need them. Thank goodness I was craving fruit, so I would always eat fruit. But once I gave birth, it's almost like your brain is too full from the conception all through to the birth to actually process what's happening and the changes that are psychologically occurring within your emotions, your hormones. Almost everything is a hormonal decision. It's very, very rare to be quite rational and logical. So I always, I'm the type of person that believes you can't find logic in emotion. Emotion is a reaction. And then you kind of think back and go, oh, I should have done this, or I should have said this. So it was this going from fully controlling who I was to having no control over what was happening. I was struggling, and I noticed that I was trying to find little things I could control, like, pelvic floor. So I went to the physio, and she gave me like almost an exercise plan to help relax the pelvic floor because it was overactive because I'm a high stress person. Surprise, surprise. So I was so focused on that. And I was like, cool, I've achieved my goal of being able to fully relax. And I was after the next thing and the next thing. And what I found was that was tiring me out, and it was stressing me out more. When you're supposed to have a bub, you're supposed to try and relax. You're on mat leave. You got to take time for yourself because it's never going to happen again. And it was just literally, I feel exhausted just even explaining that. And that's the feeling that I was feeling and carrying through the whole pregnancy. And even now I'm almost 7 months postpartum, and there's new psychological things. There's new conflicts of emotions because now my hormones are doing other things because I'm breastfeeding, and like breastfeeding less now because my bubs are starting to transition to solids. So obviously the hormones are responsible for producing breast milk. Now I'm producing less. So my cycle's slowly coming back. Oh my goodness. Now that in itself is a saga. And I'm going to be honest now and say I still don't 100% have my brain in order yet, but I am much more understanding of where I am now in this. I'm not going to say new identity. I'm going to say an evolved identity, because you can feel like you've lost a part of yourself, but it's not lost. It's just waiting in like backstage while you have other priorities. Yeah. Once that is kind of organized, invite them back onto stage. And you see, and that's kind of what I see with a lot of female athletes, where you see the before and then you see when they get back to training, but you don't really see what's that bridge in between that you need to build. It doesn't exist. So especially the first kid, new mum, you got to learn how to build that psychological bridge, learn to self-care. How can you self-care with a baby? Well, it's different to your old self-care. Yeah. And it's about, learning what you can do with what you've got. And it's tough. It is, but you can get there.
I'm so glad that you mentioned it, because especially in the fitness industry, a lot of fitness mums, they tend to veer to wanting to bounce back to the old body. But like you said, it's not necessarily about the body, like that we should be focusing less about that and more about the mindset side of things. Because again, like I truly believe if you're not working whatever's going on in your freaking head, how are you supposed to move forward and achieve the body that you're wanting? And also, like, bouncing back, like, why would you want to bounce back? Like, you don't want to go back to your old self, your past self. As you said, you've evolved. There's a new identity. Embrace what you're doing right now, because who knows, maybe you'll get pregnant again. Like, yeah.
Exactly right. And I'm so thankful that there are a couple of athletes that are promoting that I've seen just the mind over body, the whole expectation to get your body back. Like even I said, I think on an Instagram post, I don't want my old body. Like I know I can get to that stage, but it's going to be a level up from that. Like, this is an opportunity to change the way you feel. I posted a kind of like a check-in photo a couple of weeks ago. I'm 7 months postpartum and I'm still 10 kilos heavier than when I conceived. And I feel more confident in this body than I did before. I'm telling you now, before, I was one of those people that kind of were self-conscious to wear a crop top and like shorts in the gym. Like, not because of anything, it's just I grew up feeling self-conscious. And if you ask me why before, I would have been like, I don't know, it's just an ingrained habit. Now, dude, my legs are double the size and I've got short shorts with my baby, like, you know, I've got like rolls in my belly. I'm still wearing crop tops. Like, it's a different kind of strength. And, you know, as coaches for, you know, general pop, people that are not pregnant or that are not mums, we always talk about getting your mindset right to get your body right. Yeah. You can't really change your body if you don't have control over your mindset. And that is the same thing postpartum. It's the same principle. We just now are working with different variables. And like, I focused on nourishing my body for recovery, first off, because you need calories to recover. So you know what? I'm not going on a deficit. No way. I'm breastfeeding too, so that's more calories.
You shouldn't be dieting while you're...
You shouldn't be. No way. How, like, we know that to build and grow, you need to kind of be in maintenance at least, or surplus.
Yeah.
Now, thinking about not only building and regrowing yourself, but growing a baby who's feeding off you.
Yeah.
You are now a vessel as well. So you need to think about, I'm trying to grow a human at the same time as recover me. Imagine the calories that you need. So from that aspect, it's like your body's just done something incredible. That's true strength to actually go through, or however long your labor is, however long your pregnancy is. Like, man, I've seen some women who are way overdue. They're walking around like, you know, 42, 43 weeks. I'm like, dude, that's a lot to carry. But you're bloody amazing. You're pushing through it. You're not complaining. You might complain. We're allowed to complain. But it's not like, you know, those real complaints. You're just like, oh, my feet are sore. But you plod along 1 foot at a time. And that's the true strength in here that'll help you change your body down here.
Yeah, so true. It's such an important concept that you mentioned before about the dieting and pregnancy, because there's been so many cases that I would get new clients who have just had babies and be like, I'm ready to diet. And I'm like, not for the next year. And they'll be like, what do you mean? I'm like, you've just given birth. Like, you've just been through such a traumatic event that your body needs time to heal. And till you explain that to them, they don't necessarily understand it, because again, we don't get taught that. Like doctors are not nutritionists. They don't know in that regards. They're here to medicate and help us in other like forms. But in terms of nutrition, most women don't understand that, hey, you actually need to take time off to rebuild your body before you go back into dieting, if that's something that you want to do down the track.
100%. The nutrition part, I was really lucky. I stayed with my coach the whole time because I felt like I needed that guidance. And plus, it's one less thing for me to worry about. You just worry about so much. But I made sure that I built a team. Just like an athlete would build a team for, you know, competition, I built a team to help support me through my recovery. And I'll tell you a little story about, you know, what really happened to me is I was cleared to start exercising at 6 weeks, like pretty much most women. But I had a really good pelvic floor physio. I'm just going to put a disclaimer here. If you are pregnant or planning to be, or you're postpartum and you haven't seen a physio, find a pelvic floor physio, not necessarily just a women's physio. If you see a women's physio, you need to ask them if they're qualified to assess internally assess pelvic floor, because not all of them are, or to treat diastasis, the abdominal separation. So you just want to make sure that they are qualified to do that. And she pretty much said, look, you're cleared to exercise. However, I've noticed that your pelvic floor is still not relaxed. So that means your exercises are limited. You can't go back to normal training in the gym. So I spent the first, we'll say, 4 months religiously doing my pelvic floor. I went into the gym a little bit for my upper body, and I started feeling really confident, and my pelvic floor was, one thing they will ask you is, can you stop mid-wee? So while you're weeing, can you actually contract and stop it? I couldn't still, because look, with my birth, I had forceps delivery. He had a big head. I had a catheter for 24 hours. So all of that impacts the tightness of the pelvic floor and the length of the recovery. So mine was taking a bit longer. However, I got too confident and I let my ego take over. And then I started, I'm just going to increase the total volume of my training. So I added another session in the week. So I went from 2 to 3, and then I went maybe 3 to 4, or maybe I can progressive overload, and started lifting a bit heavier. Granted, not as heavy as I used to lift, but a little bit. And I regressed in my pelvic floor recovery. And when I got checked, she said, look, you definitely can't relax it at all. It's gone back to what it was during pregnancy. And I was like, oh, what did I do? And I let that old identity creep back in by itself without the growth, that kind of old Soph who had no idea what pregnancy was like, come back in. And although, she's great, I need the Soph that has also experienced pregnancy to empathize and go, all right, we need to pull back. So I've had to no more gym. I took literally 3 weeks off, and that was the hardest. 3 weeks completely off everything except pelvic floor relaxation and meditation. And now it's gone a little bit tighter, which is good, but I'm still not there. 7 months postpartum, and I still haven't walked into the gym to perform a proper session with full function. That's something in terms of the recovery aspect that I think is very important, but that nutrition, no one will tell you that training thing until you actually experience the issues, and then you go in again. The nutrition, forget it. I didn't get any advice except from my coach, which was amazing because I had a coach. So I noticed that the doctors don't tell you anything about nutrition, even for breastfeeding.
Yeah.
I thought the only reason I knew is because my coach, but also I took the time to go on and research. And because I'm a student of dietetic medicine, I had good resources available. Your normal person doesn't. Where do you go? You have a lot of general information on, there's some really good websites out there, but the information is so general. It's so hard to know where to start, and it can be very overwhelming. So impatient. But you got to be patient.
Yeah, it's a journey, from what I've spoken about with clients who have been through that journey, and with yourself, it's just being patient with the process, because the more resistance you put in it, the more you're just going to push yourself back to where you started, and you don't want that. And like you said, you were your ego just took over a little bit, and the old Soph came in, and she's like, nah, let's do it. But then Mother Soph is like, no, don't. And it's just like, what do I do? But you know what? Sometimes we just have to live and learn, yes, you pushed a little bit harder. You had to pull back for a few weeks. Training doesn't look like the same, but again, your lifestyle is completely different now. You're not the athlete you were a few years ago. You're a coach who's coaching other women who are going through the same experience as you.
Yeah, that's right. And look, just because you're not the same person that you were doesn't mean you can't be a better version of that later. It's all about life periodization instead of just training. It's understanding where you are. And something I wanted to add is a lot of women don't realize that your postpartum hormones, even if you're not breastfeeding, can actually still be playing around with you for at least a year afterwards or more. So we know that the hormones affect the way the body works. For example, your pelvic floor has estrogen receptors. So your cycle will influence the ability it has to contract properly or not. So when you're postpartum, your estrogen is all over the shop. If you're breastfeeding, even more so. Now, like, I noticed I started getting little uterine cramps. I'm like, oh no, I'm ovulating again already, you know? And I'm like, my pelvic floor's not even ready. But I felt that a few days after that, I couldn't contract my pelvic floor the same. And I went, oh, estrogen, okay. Like, it's starting to come back to some extent, but it highlights your weaknesses. Yeah. So if you are going back to training and you haven't got your cycle back, these are the things that people don't tell you to look for, because you might pee yourself during a squat.
Yeah.
And, you know, that might freak you out, but understanding how long it actually takes for your body to go back to normal is something that I think really needs to be spoken about a lot more. And that's why I try to be as raw and real on my social media as possible. Like, it's not easy.
Yeah.
And there is a facade that we go from A to B, but you haven't seen the car we've driven in to get to A to B. You might assume it's like a Maserati, but really it's like my Toyota Yaris that needs to stop, you know, a little bit on the way. Oh, I've lost a tire. Got to put it. That's literally the journey from A to B. So, I mean, I might seem a bit complainy sometimes, and I do use it to just express myself, but I've had mums message me going, I'm so glad that it's not just me.
Yeah.
And you're like, you know, you're telling us how it actually is. I'm like, well, isn't that why we're connecting? Isn't that we want to feel like we're part of a group that actually empathizes with each other? And we can't do that unless we express ourselves.
Yeah, that's so true. And I love that you mentioned that, because, again, women who become pregnant and then they get told stories, they get told, oh, you know, birth is amazing. Pregnancy will be easy. When you give birth, you know, there won't be any pain. It's such a beautiful experience, blah, blah, blah. But then you actually get into it and you're like, it wasn't fucking beautiful. I was in so much pain. Yeah. My whole pregnancy, I was sick, because like, we're all completely different. And again, for us to connect is being real and raw and understanding that, hey, you know, type A might work for some people, but then, like you said, the Toyota Yaris type B, that might be you, you know? So yeah, it's crazy.
It's definitely an experience, and look, it's worth it. It just takes effort to get through.
Yeah. And you know what? It's so important for our listeners to understand, those who have been pregnant or are thinking of becoming pregnant or have clients that are dealing right now with, you know, postpartum or becoming pregnant, is just making them realize that this journey is going to change them. Like it changed your identity. You're no longer the athlete. You're the mum who's helping other mums.
Yeah, exactly right. And you learn to be at peace with it, because you know what? Sophie athlete will come back eventually, but in a different form. She's going to be like the mum athlete, you know, what the categories they have at those comps, like mum and like the mama section. I'm so excited to do one of those.
You will rock it.
I'm so excited and be like, oh, there's my son at the front. Like, I'm literally one of those mums.
He'll be cheering you on.
Like, yeah, I mean, he's already got like stronger legs than I ever have, but you know, we'll see.
He'll be able to squat and deadlift heavier.
Oh, I reckon. Right now he's got a jiu-jitsu body, so I think Dad's trying to prime him for martial arts.
Yeah, love that. Who knows? Maybe he'll be able to do both.
Let's see. ¿Por qué no los dos?
Yeah. But who knows? Maybe he'll just wake up one day and be like, no, I don't want to do either.
I want to be a Broadway star.
There you go.
The basic mum so comes out. He's got a voice on him, this kid.
I love it. It's so good. You mentioned, what was the point? You mentioned how some women during pregnancy, well, you actually said that you experienced it, how you were trying to be this superwoman to go through everything, but not actually sitting back and enjoying the journey. Like you mentioned how it like stressed you out during a period of time where you just needed to pull back on certain things. Now that you look back on that, what are some like lessons that you've learned from that?
There is a lot of information and no information out there, meaning that there's a lot of opinion. There is a lot of feedback and there's a lot of advice that is flying around that Google Doctor will tell you. Whether or not is accurate doesn't matter because you're making emotional decisions. So everything is correct. What I learned is that your pregnancy is completely unique to you. There is no birth story that I can say was identical to my story. It's great to understand what has happened because you can learn from it. But while you're pregnant, I would say find a professional that you trust or even one friend that you trust to be your person that you might ask questions to, that you might express yourself to, because it only gives you one voice to listen to. If you listen to too many voices, you're not going to enjoy the experience. So I managed to shut off. I stopped listening to podcasts at one point because I got information overload because I'm a researcher. That's how I am. I love my studies. I love my PubMed. I love all of it, but it does get overwhelming. So when you get to, I use mat leave as my stop. Once you hit mat leave, go on holiday, physically and mentally. I started doing my morning routines where I'd sit down and I'd have my meditations in the morning, and then I would go for a walk with my belly. I'd go swimming, and I took like maybe 2 weeks of that before I gave birth to go stop, because that was one thing my coach said to me. He said, you need to enjoy this because it's the last moment you're going to have completely alone in a long, long time. So I'm an only child, and I have what I self-diagnose as only child syndrome, where I need alone time. Otherwise, I get too stimulated and exhausted. And he said, you're not going to get that. And that's going to be another obstacle that you have to work through when you have the baby. So take these 2 weeks, do nothing. Like legit, do nothing and enjoy it. And I have to say, guilt-free nothing, because I'm playing the pregnancy card, was the bloody most relaxed I've ever felt. I took all that for granted. I wish I did that for longer. But that's one thing I would say is minimize the voices, you know, especially with social media. Look, if you're not ready to get advice, just stay off it. Yeah, because a lot of people feel the need to, even if it's not asking for advice, put in their 2 cents. Because for whatever reason they're passionate about it, and it can stress you out more because there's a lot of things you have to decide on for birth, for labour. And, you know, I had one person go, the epidural did nothing. I felt nothing. I had the epidural and it was great. Like, you know, so, you know, there's a lot of reasons why the epidural didn't work. Maybe it wasn't in properly. Maybe they didn't put enough in. Maybe, because that's one thing, the hospitals tend to err on the side of caution. So they do a lot of the safest things for you. So just be mindful of that. They'll tell you either not do something or, you know, you can kind of do something. But yeah, and it was just choose one or 2 voices that you trust. Let them be your support and take your time. Pregnancy is going to happen. The labour is going to happen. You can't control it. But what you can do is just prepare, understand what labour is, and go, all right, pick the track that's best for you, that works for you, that works also for your partner. I have to stress that your partner is part of this as well. COVID was hard because we had Archie, I think, in between 2 lockdowns. So Lance couldn't actually go to any of the ultrasounds, and that's a really hard thing for the partner because they're not experiencing it. And the ultrasounds and the appointments tend to be the only connection they have. So involve your partner. Lance and I actually did a little workshop online for how your partner can best support the birthing parent in labour and beforehand. And Lance pretty much said it was great to do like a coach and athlete relationship. So the birth partner is the coach. So they're in charge of hydration, nutrition, motivation, encouragement, and rest and recovery accountability. So all through the labor, he'd be like, all right, drink some water. Drink now. Would you like anything to eat? He'll put a snack there. Okay, good. All right, breathe. And he was like counting my reps when I was pushing like a coach because I asked him to. That helped me a lot because I knew I had 3 rep max with a 4-minute break in between each rep.
I love that.
And that worked for me because I could focus. I could get my intra-abdominal pressure going, pretend I was doing a squat, but relax my pelvic floor. And like, it's all those little things. Have your partner ready and talk about how you want them to be. That was another point that really helped. I can't even stress how safe I felt knowing that Lance knew his role and took charge of that role. I didn't have to worry about anything that was happening around me. He was my voice. He was my coach. All I had to do was get this baby out.
I love that. That's so special to have that bond. Yeah, it's really powerful. I think I would love that encouragement when, whenever I have babies and have my partner being like, all right, let's go. And I'll be like, yes, come on.
Like, I'm definitely available if you need me. I can come in and count your reps for you.
Awesome.
Knees out. We need to open the hips.
Just like a squat.
100%.
Oh my God, that is so funny. Oh, wow. That is amazing. Yeah, that would have been really tough during lockdowns, not being able, like kudos to you and kudos to everyone else during that time. Like, yeah, wow.
It was nuts. There were some hospitals that wouldn't even let the birth partner into the birthing suite.
Yeah.
And that's something when I was doing some of the online courses about labour, that they were saying that you can actually demand to have your birth partner in there. It is, if the hospitals are, COVID, which they shouldn't be now because it's not as, crazy. But if you do get into a situation where they're not letting you in or they're not letting you to the ultrasound, there are clinics that will allow it. And you can, especially if you're in labour, you can demand your birth partner be in there. It is your right to have a support person. And most hospitals will have that in their guidelines, say you can have your support person in there, which is so important because you're at your most vulnerable and most illogical because you're experiencing so much. It's hard to make decisions. You need someone there on your behalf. So push for it if there is an obstacle.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, you don't want to be doing that alone. And for those who did, like my heart.
Oh, you were amazing.
Yeah, exactly. That would have been so freaking tough. And by the way, I love those lessons that you learned from being, how hard you pushed to now realizing that, hey, you just needed that extra time off. And you know what? In the long run, that's helped you, having those couple of weeks before you gave birth. I know for myself, when I take time off, I'm like the guilt comes in, the little thoughts in your head. You're like, oh, like there's still work to do. There's always going to be work to do. As business owners, as coaches, there's always something for us to do. But like you said, to take just that 2 weeks off and just, go all out about yourself, because again, you're going to have to look after your little baby boy now for the rest of your life. You're not going to be alone now.
Yep, that's it. And to be honest, I am struggling with that a bit. Yeah. We made it a point with Lance to give me 2 hours of me time a week.
I love it.
We looked at our schedules and I blocked out an hour on a weekday and an hour on the weekend. And he's like, you can do whatever you want in that hour. He's like, I'll have the baby or my mum will have the baby. And for me, it's no work, no study. None of that happens in that hour. That hour is for if I want to go out for a walk by myself, if I want to just have a sleep or lie down, if I want to, go and catch up with somebody, or like it's something, it's free time. It's legit free time. And we've tried that. This is my second week of that. And I felt a huge difference checking in with coach this week saying I had 2 hours. It seems like nothing, like 2 hours. I have that support system. So I'm like, look, I bet I should utilize it. And that's another mum guilt thing where you feel like you want to utilize it, but you can't. It's a very weird sensation. It's a conflict of emotions. It's like when you leave the baby, you're like, I need some time. And then 10 minutes later, you're like, I miss him, and you can't have your time. I've never dealt with that kind of conflict of emotion. And this is where we go, it's guilt-free because we've scheduled it. It's not like, oh, I need time off, but it's that awkward letting go. Whereas this time we're like, we know he's okay. I'm allowed to let go. So you give permission for yourself to just let go. And that's one strategy that's worked for me. There are a lot of different strategies that may work for other people. So it's really trial and error to see how you can fill your own cup, because that is very important. You can't pour from an empty cup, especially if there is a dependent that wants to drink from you and is not getting anything, whether it's attention, playtime. Like after that 1 hour, I'm so refreshed and ready to mum. Like he gets the best playtime after I've had my me time. And it's difficult. And I understand women who find it very difficult to kind of detach mentally, but it doesn't mean you love your kid any more or any less. It means the quality time you get with your kid could potentially be maximized a little bit better. You might feel less tired. Maybe that's the winner. You might feel less tired when your kid's like, read me a book, or let's play this, or let's go outside. To be honest, you're always tired, but less tired, or a little bit more like happier to do things, and it changes the dynamic a lot.
I love that. So important, because like 2 hours out of your week, like with the scheme of things, it's absolutely nothing. But for us to be like, all right, let's take those 2 hours off and literally just do whatever it is that you want to do. It just gives you a little bit more freedom as well. I know for myself, when I take myself away from work and I'll be like, cool, I'll just give my Sunday to just all of me, like not dedicated to work. But then Sunday comes and you're like, oh, I really should be doing work. And for yourself, you know, when you have that 1 hour off, you may even like message Lance and be like, is everything okay? Do you need me? Like, you know, like there's always a form, as you said, like a form of guilt for us taking time off. But like you said, we need to let go of that and actually fill our own cup, because again, the more you're going to pour out of it, you're just going to end up burning out and being extra tired, and that does not serve anyone.
Yeah, and your cup will then be broken, a broken cup. So you've got to fix your cup and then fill it up. That's even more work.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
Yeah, it's so exhausting. What are your plans for 2022?
Oh, good question. So to give you a bit of context, I've been PTing and training people since about 2011, and online for about 4 years. But I've been training pre and postnatal women kind of on and off through this whole time. But there was always, you know, you can be really good, say, in theory, understanding the knowledge, the practice, and applying it to people of special groups. For example, like without experiencing it. So, for example, I don't have to have my ACL completely burst to be able to help someone work through and re-strengthen their knee, right? But since I've been pregnant, I have this empathy when it comes to that psychological and identity shift. I mean, physical training and all the nutrition stuff is important. But like I said before, if the mental side is not looked after and nurtured, the physical stuff is not going to happen. And for 2022, I really wanted to go in there shifting my audience a little bit and actually trying to reach out to more, not just postpartum or pregnant women, but women who want to or intend to have children, to kind of set up a realistic expectation and actually start creating a foundation of mental preparation of what's to come, to mitigate any of those, you know, issues that may occur, or to have better management strategies and coping skills to go through that transition. Because it's an area, yes, there are some practitioners that do it in terms of, you know, educating them about matrescence and giving them some little strategies to use. But then you got to incorporate a baby. Like, it's very hard to work on yourself when you have a baby with you as well. So how do you juggle it? If you're coming from a heavy training background like myself, how do you work through that? Nutrition, how do you work through that? So it's a holistic perspective, and that's something I really wanted to go into a little bit more this year. I've got a couple of clients that are training with me online now who are either pregnant or like early pregnancy. We've got second trimester. I have at least one client who's already got a kid, who's on a second and wants to do the postpartum right. This is where I really want to drive a little bit more awareness and exposure into. It's not just about getting a body back, in inverted commas. It's not just about nutrition for breastfeeding. It's about holistic health and well-being for the mother, because mother support lacks. Baby still gets checkup 6 months, 8 months, 12 months. Mum's last checkup is 6 weeks postpartum. How is that fair?
Yeah.
You know, and then it's mum's responsibility to go and seek help if she needs it. I mean, I was right on the brink of postpartum anxiety, and I didn't even know it until I had a meltdown.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things, like, I was too busy to notice signs, you know, and my husband, obviously, I didn't show anything. The, invisible illness is, again, something that you can't see. So how do you know? And this is something I really wanted to grow and work on. And if I can help bring awareness and make people feel like they are not alone, I will travel with them in that Toyota Yaris from A to B. I will help them fix their tires, fill up the gas, polish the car if need be, to get there in one piece and in a pretty good knit car. So that's kind of where I want to go in 2020.
So good. And you know what? Lamborghinis are overrated anyway.
You can't put a baby in there.
No, exactly.
You only put it in a Yaris right now, but maybe I can help you evolve and get yourself like a 7-seater if you want multiple kids. Yeah.
I freaking love that. What a vision. What a powerful vision, just to help more mothers who, were in, the same space as you are, where they haven't been able to seek that help, where now you're literally there. You're going to be helping them along this journey. And I think that's such a gift that you have from like what you've been not taught, but like from what you've learned from this journey. And now you're going to be able to educate other women and help them along the way. So cool. While we're on the topic of that, where can our listeners find you? How can they work with you?
Amazing. So probably the best way is through my Instagram, which is just my name, Sofia Toumbas. There is a link there that gives you a little bit about like the different programs that I'm doing. I have almost launched a project called the Postpartum Project, which is literally the accumulation of all my research, experiential knowledge, and connection with allied health professionals. So this is the program that I wish I had when I was pregnant. It's literally a one-stop shop for your physical, mental, emotional recovery journey, and it's a little bit of a toolbox for you to get started and connecting you with actual allied health professionals. So I've kind of reached out, and they've like been so happy to help with the different modules. So it's not just my research, you've got stuff that's backed by years of experience and recommendations on where to start. And it's not just, general Kegel exercises. Let's actually learn about it a bit more, how to self-assess, which is the main purpose of this whole program, is tools for you to self-assess, to see where you're at, whether you need a little bit more help here, whether you are fine with this tips and self-management. So a little bit more education about that postpartum recovery that is not always spoken about.
So powerful. Well, for our listeners, get onto this. Seriously, you will not want to miss this out. Sofia, thank you so much for joining me. I swear, I've learned so much from today's conversation from, a non-pregnant woman, but I know I'm going to be taking notes after this going, cool, what is the list that I need to make to prepare myself for birth?
I'm so glad you got something. I like talking, if you didn't already notice, so I will ramble. I'm sure everyone knows my life story already. But yeah, no, 100%. Like, there's a fine line between over preparing and being prepared. So just take a deep breath before you do or make any decisions. And that's whether you're pregnant or not. I think it's one of those moments before you jump to anything. Take a deep breath and go, look, don't worry, it might not happen. Or, just be ready. That's it. Just relax, let it go. Every journey is different, wherever you are in life. Just play it as it lies. That's what is it, the golf terminology? Play the ball where it lies. And that's exactly how to approach it.
Yeah, I preach that 100%. Cool, girls. Thank you again so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please recommend it, share it, screenshot it, tag us at the Women's Fitness Academy, tag myself, tag Sophia. Until then, as Sophia mentioned, let go and start embracing your new motherhood identity.
Woohoo! Preach.